we've got emerged slanted horizontals, and we've got short branching browns. Now, over on this side, we've got some branching browns, and then we've got some long branching browns on the vertical surface. Got a green leafy blade in a deep crevice, shaded. A small specimen of a flat branching red subhabitat. Let's call that site 1A, and that'll go in a jar. Our collection site 1, including this little sub-collection that we just made in that crevice, is going to go until we see that transverse gully behind us. Okay? Now we're looking at the vertical sides of this boulder mass that we're stepping on. And these look like they're olive green, but these are really brown pharophytes. Yeah. And you can see that they've got an epiphytic algae, a little tuft, you know, morphology of a tuft growing on them.
The deepest point is about...
So again, that was like 5 or 6 centimeters.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a species of red, and it's a flat blade, and it's actually it's got little blades on its lateral margins, but it's basically an undulated flat blade. Got a very simple stipe and that little, remember the stem part and the holdfast is. Collection site 2 have a red algae that's covered with calcium carbonate. So this is, you know, secreting its own shell to inhibit herbivory.
Yeah.
Flat branching red. Outside of the puddle, there's some very small of the flat green blades. I'm not sure what's this dark coloration there, but it's got the wall.
Like a
so this branching, this little tufted thing growing on the barnacle shells looks similar to me to the epiphyte that we picked on. Okay, so let's take some of these branching browns. Again, on this side of this first rock mass, there's a slanting ledge that's slanting downwards, heading west, and then it comes abutting a little ridge in the rock, 0 meters to about 2.5 or so. And now we're in collection site 3, the westward downward sloping face of that rock. And again, it's exposed, moist. We've got these short branching browns. We've got barnacles. We've got, again, now in this little abutment of the downward slope, when it's coming to a vertical edge that's, so you've got the calcareous red. Yeah, so that's the flat branching red. So that's flat branching. Well, okay, so the 2 reds seem to be co-dominant in this little moisture pocket here. And the depth of that is 3 centimeters in depth for this. Now, so this is going to be collection 3A. Again, on the vertical side of this collection tub 3, the long branching browns. They're coming off high off of. Under these long branching browns, there's a pretty healthy collection of these short branching reds. So I'm going to put some short branching reds in here, but keep in mind that they are from the shaded protection on the vertical sides below the long branching browns. So they're protected, they don't get dried out. And there's also some greens here. The greens are flat blades, okay. Green blades, and the long branching browns. Okay, so collection site 4 is in a swift moving transverse channel, which is just about 300 millimeters or 30 centimeters, the height of our ruler. The channel itself was about 4.8 to 5. The bottom, a small bit of gravel on the rock, large green blades, larger than we've collected, 6 or 7 centimeters. We've got the very mature forms of the flat branching reds.
That's a good one.
So here we've got another but a much larger specimen of the flat red blade, and you can still see the perforations off the sides, only they're bigger. And this is an invasive species that was first identified here in 1997 by the woman Martine Viard-Bonsack, who wrote our lab manual for the seaweeds.
I think that's the rock. That's here too.
Okay.
Same color.
That is collection 4, site 4. These long greens. We've got some, along with the green blades, we've got more of that calcareous red. At the top, we've got some of the branching, flat branching red with some filamentous associated with it. Oh, that's interesting. So this is the first specimen of our this tubular green. It's it's a spongy tube branching.
Yeah.
So that was that at the base of the wall?
Yeah.
And it's growing along with, or has epiphyte on it, of a kind of a not really delicate hair-like, but red or brown, not even sure. Again, as you go up the wall, just at the edge of the water surface is more of the calcareous reds. How about we click from that? Site 5A is a quiet offshoot of the channel, or at least quieter. It's still got some tidal connection, about 5.5 meters to 7.8 meters. One thing to notice, what do you see just looking at this right off the bat?
The red dominant.
Okay, well, how do you describe that red?
Blade flat.
Okay, right, blades are flat. So a flat blade, so the red blades are big, and so they look like they're dominating, but you know, they have big bodies, and they're dominating the waterscape. But again, it looks very much the same species as we saw other places. Sometimes it's got epiphytes on it. There's more of this calcareous red growing in taller bunches. More green blades. Yeah. Wow, some of the green blades are as long as the red blades. This long. So we got stuff here that we got in faster moving water, both submerged, but this is deeper and quieter, and the bodies of the seaweeds were longer. They were both folios, so pretty delicate to tear. The red and the green. Okay, so the temperature is about 20 degrees here.
24.
So that's 60 centimeters at the deepest point. Wow, a tubular green.
Magic.
Could have.
The walls are dominated with flat branching reds, some with epiphytes, along with the calcareous reds. And the bottom, some parts are clear. The walls of the gully have the long streaming reds. So the foliose ones, the long reds and the greens, are on the wall, the vertical walls of the gully. Back down to
20 degrees.
Okay, so see those light brown guys? These are I think this is the same species as the long branching brown, but see what, they're much lighter in color and they're less mature at that spot. So we've got another exposed horizontal. See those bright orange splotches under the red, foliose red? From 8.5 to about 9.5. So it's about a meter in width. It's totally quiet, totally cut off from the surf. That's what they call the crust. I don't know if we talked about it in your lab section. We did in one lab section. It was what that specimen was not. And a crust is basically a two-dimensional splash of color, and that's called Hildenbrandia, and I think it's a brown. But again, if you wanted to collect that, you'd have to scrape it off with a razor blade and then look at it under the scope first. What do you see dominating?
Red.
The long flat blade red and what? Long branching browns. But those are actually not attached to the puddle. They're attached to the vertical wall. So this whole puddle, has these big bodies of the red blade, that invasive species. We've got the calcareous red, the edges, you know, this is surrounded by, again, an emerged horizontal surface. So we see, you know, the branching browns and small specimens of the green blades. Okay, great, 23 degrees for this shallow puddle. And how warm? You said 23? Yeah, that's pretty warm. I don't know what else. Wow. These specimens, we just collected the long blade red from this shallow puddle. We've got the calcareous red. Let's collect on the west side of this shallow, very shallow pool. So this is 7, and what you see mostly is what? The long branching browns. And you've got specimens way up here that are a little less mature, and then you've got really gigantic specimens down here. And I want to pull. All right, so this is an extremely mature specimen of probably the same of the branching browns that we saw back near our zone 1. A characteristic that is in part naming them. They have this air vesicle, a single air vesicle along the main axis. It's basically this big air bubble. And, you know, we saw long blades being suspended in water. But these oftentimes are spending their time out of water because, you know, we're seeing them on surfaces. So how do you describe the surface that it's growing off of? So it's a vertical surface and they're out of water at low tide. You can see that many of the long axes have those single air vesicles. The reproductive structures are off to the sides. So these are not mature. See how the side branches just kind of end in little round branches, kind of? And when they get sexually mature, those become obviously swollen, and their role as a sexual receptacle is more obvious. But these air bladders are not sexual receptacles. They're along the main axis and they're just doing their job for buoyancy. We've got, they're probably the same. We've got smaller green blades. They go inside, and again, these are, and we also have short branching browns on the very edge of the top of the wall. So you can collect some right there. Go right down to the rock and pull them out.
It's inside the...
Yeah.
So all of this stuff is coming from, you know, exposed horizontal rock. The very long browns are off of vertical surfaces. The short branching browns are at the top of them. And Timmy just picked out the same species, I'm pretty sure, of that long branching brown, but see how less mature it is. You know, you don't see those big air vesicles, and it's just a smaller body. On the vertical rocks, the long branching brown was dominant. On the flat, moist areas, you know, you've got the small green blades mixed with, you know, the blue mussels and the white barnacles, along with some very short specimens that we have, right? This is the short branching brown. And here, the little bulbous tips on these guys are the sexual receptacles.
They can like see this.
So, and you can see the little bumps on them. They have little microscopic pits where the gametes are actually produced. And again, it looks green, but it's a brown. So that's a good place not to get confused when you start your work next week. Yeah, spongy tubes. And that's more of the branching red, I think, but it's got a different morphology, so we'll have to look that up. It's got more calcareous reds. The deal is we've got the red blades again, but see how small they are. So this is quiet water, and it's not thriving as much as it was in the submerged active water. It's another quiet pool, but it's much quieter, shallower, and we've got codominant calcareous red, spongy tube green, so 22 degrees centigrade. So you see the dominant shift between species with slightly different conditions are still submerged. The depths aren't all that much different, but it's very quiet. Temperature isn't that much different. But now you've got the codominance between the spongy greens, the calcareous reds, and the less numerically dominant and very much smaller red blades. All right, so that's the end of our collection. So we have a top for this.